Let's talk about it for a second. There's been a big talk about IQ and mental development. There has always been a big understanding of IQ and mental development. There has always been a cognitive stratification or a cognitive strategy to intellect. They always want to say that black people have low IQ and certain people have high IQ. We're going to go into these things, right? So you bring up the term cognitive stratification. Cognitive stratification takes different forms at the top and at the bottom of the scale of intelligence. Just smart, dumb people. A storyline is that modern societies identify the highest youths with ever increasing efficiency and to guide them into fairly narrow educational and occupational channels. We're reading part one of IQ, the bell curve. We're reading the bell. I'm gonna read the bell curve. I'm gonna actually read. I'm gonna turn my channel to an IQ challenging channel. We're gonna read the bell curve a little bit, right? Its storyline is that modern societies identify highest youth with ever increasing efficiency and to guide them into fairly narrow educational and occupational channels. So you consider having a high IQ if you work in a legal, law, lawyer, or doctor or technological standards in America. And when they bring up cognitive stratification, they're only bringing up the stratification or the bell curve of intelligence to see if you can fit into one of their systems. These channels of increasingly lucrative and influential, leading to the development of a distant stratum in the social hierarchy. Yeah, you looking for a social hierarchy in your job. You're looking to say that you have a higher IQ or you're smarter than the average man or you are higher in the cognitive stratification because of your hierarchy or social hierarchy of job, which we dub the cognitive elites. See, everybody on YouTube wants to be considered cognitively elite. They want the light of Lucifer. They want the knowledge of everyone else over others. Now, check this. This this overbreeding or this overwhelmingly need to be in the higher IQ or the higher stratification of intellect breeds isolation. It's lonely at the top. It's lonely at the top. The isolation of the brightest from the rest of society is already extreme. We look at the Nick Fluentes, the Candace Owens, the Tucker Carsons, the Glenn Becks, the um certain social media standouts, right? A lot of social media standouts because of their high IQ of knowing what's going on, they become isolated, right? So we often ask we ask ourselves, how can these high IQ basketball players, entertainers, date the same women? Well, because it's an isolation when you get to the top. It's lonely at the top, and the top is gate kept. It's gate kept. So the top is gate kept. So the isolation of the top is gate kept. So the isolation of the brightest from the rest of society is already extreme. The forces drive it or grow. The forces driving it are growing stronger rather than weaker. Governments can influence the forces but cannot neutralize them. So governments can only influence podcasters, but they can't necessarily neutralize them because you can clip, reload, and upload and become a new relevant podcaster. And this emergence of cognitive elite. That's what the red pill is. The red pill is trying to emerge a cognitive elite. But what happens when you have too many people cognitively elite? What happens when you wake too many people up? This does not mean that the member of the cognitive elite will never cross paths with a person with low IQ. It's easy, especially on these panels and doing internet and trolling, and it's easy to cross paths with lower IQ individuals, even if you deem yourself a higher class individual. But the encounters that matter tend to be limited. See, you go back and forth on people on these panels that have a lower IQ than you. You troll them, you joke with them, but you tend to have lower actual real life interactions with these people because we're gonna go into how IQ is used as a class stratification. You have the stratosphere. All right, this I used to have the buildosphere, but you have the stratosphere before you get to the ionosphere and all these other spheres, different levels to hierarchy. And in this cognitive stratification, the bell curve, the um the bandwidth of intellect, a lot of people fall short. The more the more intimate and the more enduring the human relationship is, the more likely it is to be among people of similar intellectual level. That the brightest are identified has been has its benefits. That they have become so isolated, right? What up, Cassandra? How you doing, sweetheart? What up? What up, Cassandra? What up? What up? What up? What up? Flat Earth. Bombs. What it do? They obey they that become so isolated and inbred has its cost. So you have the special elite, the smart people, right? You see this in the British families, you see this in the royal families. You see that people get so caught up in IQ and intelligence and this so-called knowledge of being that they start to inbreed themselves. And is that a higher IQ or a lower IQ practice? You can get so high onto your IQ that you start to practice lower IQ behaviors. So the cognitive elite started to practice a form of incest. Some of these costs are already visible in American society, while others live in a other horizon, right? Like we can really talk about this stuff, right? Human society has had measures of cognitive stratification. The human hunters among the bushmen of the Kalahari tend to score higher above the other average tribe members in intellectual testing. So hunters score higher on IQ rather than gatherers. And at one point, right? So at one point, we can sit here and say that, okay, these African people that are out here hunting monkeys and traveling the Sahara, we can say they have a lower, we can say now in a technological age that they have a lower IQ, but at one point, a hunter had an average higher IQ than a person that just gathered information. We are in the age of information gathering, which makes you have an higher IQ. But at one point, being able to hunt, being able to track an animal gave you a higher IQ than a person that was able to just gather information. But this is where the trials and tribulations of cognitive stratification go. You can have so much cognitive stratification that you forget the lower things that make you really build up to your higher IQ. And this book really talks about this. Doubtless would have chief ministers of Cleopatra's Egypt, the mandarins who ran China for centuries were chosen by examinations that tested for understanding of Confucian classics, and in doing so, screened for intelligence. The priests of the monks of the medieval Europe, recruited and self selected for reasons correlated with cognitive ability, must have been brighter than the average. You had to be brighter than the average, right? You had to bring a social cognitive stratification. And the cognitive class in education did not start into the 1900s and build itself into the 1990s. We are part of the cognitive stratification. We are very much part of the cognitive stratification, right? There were plenty of years where the average intelligent American did not go to college. The average intelligent American in the 1900s did not attend college. The average American with intellect did not attend college till after the Second World War II, after reading the bell curve and the building of an intellect and a cognitive strategy. So a lot of white America did not build their intellectual technological advantages that they claim in this world until the 1980s. And this is proven in this book. Okay. The slope remains steep in periods as different as in Eisenhower's 1950s, LBJ's 1960s, and Nixon's early 1970s. After 1974 came a particular plunge, a dip in college degree that lasted until 1981. So there was a collapse in American intellect and Americans going to college up until 1981. And before then, it was considered that the cognitive stratification did not need a consolidation of a college. College up into the 1900s did not consolidate the cognitive stratification of humanity. Smart people did not attend college historically. Historically, smart people did not attend. Historically, smart Americans did not attend college. What happened is the technological advances into what we have today. Smart people wanted to find other smart people. So they created other tests like the IQ test, which few people have actually taken, and there's no biomarkers of it. They created things like the SAT, the ACT. We'll go further into these things that furthermore try to create a form of intellectual biomarkers of who's smart and who's not, and who gets to govern and take good jobs in practice and classification. This is a class warfare. IQ is not about intelligence, it's about class warfare. In 1974, a particular plunge in a college degree that lasted until 1981, particular because it occurred when generosity of scholarships, loans from colleges, foundations, and governments alike was into its peak. This period of declining graduates was followed by a steep increase from 1981 to 1990. Also, particular in college was becoming harder to afford for the middle class Americans during those years. As of 1990, the proportion of students getting into college degrees had more than made up for the losses during the 1970s and established a new record of BA and BSs, Bachelors of Arts and Bachelors of Science. Being awarded is such profuse that they amounted a 30% of the 23-year-old population. So in the early 1900s, only 2% of 23-year-olds had a college degree, whether it was Bachelor of Arts or whether it was Bachelor of Science. But in the 1990s, it increased to 30% of um 23-year-olds having a bachelor's in the arts or bachelor's in the science. Now, this was not an increase on intellect. It wasn't necessarily an increase on IQ. What they did is they lowered the percentile. At one point, you had to be in the 90th percentile in this country to go to college. They started to lower the percentile to they started to lower the percentile from extremely smart to fairly smart. And they lowered it from fairly smart to mediocrely smart. So that's how the mediocre minded person can still attend a college university. And that's the bell curve. And that's the reason why that's the reason why the bell curve believes that you can breed or you can teach intelligence rather than breed intelligence. Right? We're gonna get into it. Right. There was a cognitive stratification throughout the college systems in the 1960s. Right? At one point, Harvard was an easy college to get into. Two out of three people got into it, but then they was able to raise their standards, saying not so many people were able to get into it, and that leads to the Ivy League versus Pennsylvania. See, at one point, the average IQ to get into college needed to be in the 140-ish range. And I think Einstein was like 145. So like I think you had to be like really smart to get into college. But they lowered it to like 117, then they lowered it like 115 to the point where the average American is now saying my IQ score is 100 or higher. But at one point it was significantly above 100. But that's neither here nor to say. But the cognitive stratification of the higher point or the bell curve or the the digital footprint of intelligence was even talked about even in the 1960s, right? So the same the cognitive stratification throughout the college system in the 1960s. The same process occurred around the country. As a figure below shows, we picked out colleges from freshman SAT. See, everyone on the internet loves to talk about what's your IQ? I have a high IQ. You have a low IQ. But when I hear a person speak of IQ and standardized testing, and they don't bring up the SAT and the ACT, that lets me know that they have not studied the bell curve intelligence class in American life. They don't really know what they're talking about. They're uninformed about IQ and how it is categorized, studied, or graded. And I hear a lot of people on YouTube bring up IQ, but they haven't studied the basis of where IQ and standardized testing comes from. And the IQ testing, studying a person's IQ steps really quickly out of the rudimentary alphabet of I and Q, and it goes into other terms like SAT, and other standardized testing, right? So we pick colleges with freshman SAT verbal means that were separated by roughly 40 point intervals in 1961. The Pacific schools are represented as those clustering near each break point. There's a breaking point, right? A gatekeeping. A break point is a gate, right? At the bottom is a state college in the second echelon, right? I'm a first tier black person, but when it comes down to echelon, they say that southern areas are lower echelon, right? Or second echelon. They say that southern education is second. They say that southern education is second tier education to New England education, right? So at the bottom of the state college, the second echelon of a state system represented by Georgia Southern, and then comes by State University, North Carolina, where I'm from, North Carolina. Then five successfully more selective private schools: Villanova, Tulane, Colby, Amherst, and Harvard. We have placed the SAT scores against the backdrop of overall distribution of SAT scores for the entire population of high school seniors, right? So when there's no way you can bring up the SAT. You can't bring up IQ and not talk about the SAT or the ACT scores and ability to get into college. Gap separation from student bodies of the elite schools of those of the public universities within the elite schools. Another significant level of stratification had also developed. So the elite schools, the Harvards, right? So you have the Ivy League schools, and then you have the Seven Sisters. The Seven Sisters, or the other schools, the female schools, right? And I want to read this to you because these foundations have been around for a while, right? In the same year that, in the same year as these SAT IQ data were collected, right? So I find it mighty funny that people are so against surveillance. We have a society that is so against surveillance, but you don't understand that the more people can track your IQ through these SAT and ACT tests, they can surveillance your intellectual capability and your intellectual capability will now deem you as a threat. Listen to this, right? In the same year as SAT data scores were collected, the Carnegie Foundation began an ambitious statewide study of high school seniors and their college experience in the entire state of Pennsylvania. By happy coincidence, the investigations used the same form of Otis intelligence test, right? The Otis intelligence test. And now I don't claim to be high IQ, but you know what? I think I can read a little bit, right? So the Otis intelligent test is where your whole IQ, SAT, ACT, and standardized testing to monitor how smart you are to help the system comes from. Tests use the SAT Commission. Among other tests, they reported means for the sophomore classes at the colleges and universities of Pennsylvania in 1928. Pennsylvania was then and now a large state with a wide variety of public and private universities, small, large, prestigious, and pedestrian. The IQ equivalent of the average of all Pennsylvania colleges was 107. So in Pennsylvania, they had them Philly niggas smart. They might ride dirt bikes in the middle of the street. They might wear scullies and shiesties, but the Philly niggas are smart. The Philly niggas are smart. It is what it is. It is what it is, right? Which put the average Pennsylvanian student in the 68th percentile, considerably below the average of the elite schools. But 10 Pennsylvania colleges have freshman classes with means IQs that put them in the 75th percentile to the 90th percentile. In other words, students going to any of the several Pennsylvania colleges were on average virtually indistinguishably in cognitive ability of the students in the Ivy League and Seven Sisters. So there's 14 major colleges. There's 14 Ivy League colleges. There's seven of them which are male, and there's seven which are female, which is called the Ivy League and the Seven Sisters. At one point, Philadelphia was producing these dumbass low IQ Philly niggas was producing people with a higher IQ, or no, no, not higher, but I would say a combative or at least a competitive IQ of the higher Ivy League and seven sister city universities. So when you talk about IQ, is IQ a learned thing? Is it is it a genetic thing, or where did this really come from, right? And I can tell you, inheriting IQ comes from an in particular person. I'm trying to find his name for you, but I don't have his in particular name for you right now. I read this. I don't have his name for you right now. But there's an individual, I think it's like Bill Glanton, right? Um, I think I forgot what his name is. Forgot what his name is. All right, I forgot what his name is. Forgot what his name is. Forgot what his name is, but hold on. Hold on. Can't find his name right now. But at one point, right, America had a more control on the cognitive stratification of the country. Our IQ had a better uh, bell curve. The country has lost its bell curve. We have become insidious. We have become demonstrative. We have lost our intelligence. Y'all have a blessing.